Welcome to your deep dive. Today we are diving into an article from Soul Care Counseling called "If We Love One Another, Why Do We Fight So Much?" We thought this might, resonate with you all, especially if you are curious about relationship dynamics.
It's interesting because this article flips the script on how we usually think about conflict in relationships.
Okay.
It suggests that those heated moments, those times when you feel like you are speaking different languages, could actually be a sign that both partners are longing for connection.
Okay, that's a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah.
So you are saying that even when we are at each other's throats, we are actually both reaching out.
Exactly. It's a bit counterintuitive, right? But think about it this way. Our brains are hardwired for connection. It's a primal need, just like food and shelter.
Yeah.
So when we sense that connection slipping away, it triggers a kind of panic in us.
So instead of calmly saying, "Hey, I need a hug," we end up slamming doors or giving the silent treatment.
Right?
That doesn't seem like a very effective way to reconnect.
Yeah. You are absolutely right. It's not. It's like we are trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The article calls this pattern a negative cycle, where the very actions we take to try and reconnect end up pushing our partner further away.
The irony. Can you give us like a real-world example of what this negative cycle might look like?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Imagine a couple. Let's call them Sarah and John.
Okay.
Sarah has had a long day at work and is craving some quality time with John.
Okay.
But John's engrossed in a project and barely acknowledges her when she comes home.
Okay. I can see how Sarah might start to feel a little neglected in this scenario.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what does Sarah do? She starts peppering John with questions,
Uh-huh.
trying to engage him in conversation.
Okay.
But John, feeling pressured and overwhelmed, retreats further into his work.
Oh, I can see this going downhill fast.
Yeah.
Sarah's feeling ignored and John's feeling suffocated.
Exactly. And this is where the negative cycle kicks in. Sarah, feeling increasingly disconnected, starts to criticize John for being distant and uncaring. John, in turn, gets defensive and shuts down even more,
Wow.
creating this ever-widening chasm between them.
This negative cycle sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It can be.
Is there a way to break free from this pattern?
Absolutely.
Hi.
The article uses a great metaphor to describe this dynamic: the dance of disconnection.
Ooh, I like that.
Like in any dance, there are two partners,
Okay.
each with their own steps.
Okay.
In this case, we have the pursuer and the withdrawer.
Okay. Tell me more about this dance.
Sure.
Who is leading and who is following?
Well, the pursuer, like Sarah in our example,
Okay.
is the one who actively seeks connection.
Okay.
They crave communication, closeness, and emotional responsiveness.
Right.
When they don't get it, they feel a sense of emptiness and might become demanding or critical in their attempts to elicit a response.
And the withdrawer, like John, is the one who takes a step back.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Withdrawers often feel overwhelmed by intense emotions and retreat as a way to protect themselves and the relationship from further conflict.
So it's not that they don't care, they are just coping in a different way.
Precisely. It's important to remember that both the pursuer and the withdrawer are longing for connection.
Right.
They just have very different ways of expressing and experiencing those needs.
Okay.
The article even quotes a pursuer saying, "I feel lonelier in this relationship than when I am by myself."
Wow.
Which really highlights that deep yearning for closeness that isn't being met.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
What about withdrawers? What are they saying?
Withdrawers often express feeling like they can never get things right. The article quotes one saying, "I can never get it right, so I don't know why I try. I'm never good enough." It really captures that sense of feeling trapped and helpless to meet their partner's needs.
So you've got these two very different reactions to conflict, and both partners end up feeling frustrated and alone. It's no wonder couples fight so much.
Yeah.
It's like they are speaking entirely different languages.
And to make things even more complex,
Oh, no.
there are actually 3 variations of this negative cycle.
Wait, 3. I am all ears. Break it down for me.
The first type is the pursue-pursue cycle,
Okay.
where both partners are pursuers.
Okay.
Imagine a scenario where both Sarah and John are constantly demanding attention and reassurance from each other,
Yeah?
leading to a constant power struggle.
Yikes, that sounds exhausting. What about the other two?
The withdraw cycle involves both partners being withdrawers.
Okay.
In this case, both Sarah and John might shut down emotionally,
Okay.
creating an icy distance between them, almost like they're living separate lives under the same roof.
That sounds incredibly lonely, even though they are technically together.
Yes.
What is the third type?
The third type is the most common one, the pursue-withdraw cycle, which we've already explored a bit. This is where one partner, the pursuer, actively seeks connection, while the other partner, the withdrawer, retreats further into their shell.
I'm starting to see how these different dynamics can play out in real life.
Yeah.
Have you seen this dance of disconnection play out in your own work with couples?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have seen countless couples caught in this frustrating pattern.
Wow.
And you know what is fascinating?
Right.
They often come into therapy thinking they are fighting because they are not compatible or because they simply don't love each other anymore. But what they discover is that they are actually fighting because they are both desperately longing for that same connection.
Wow.
They are just going about it in ways that are completely counterproductive.
It's like they are both trying to get to the same destination,
Right.
but they are taking completely different routes, and they keep missing each other along the way.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But the good news is there is hope for change.
Oh.
These couples can learn to recognize their patterns, understand their individual needs, and develop healthier ways to connect.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. I bet a lot of our listeners are wondering, how do we actually change these patterns? Where do we even begin?
Well, the article briefly touches on a therapeutic approach called emotionally focused therapy, or EFT.
Okay.
It's been shown to be incredibly effective in helping couples break free from these negative cycles and build more secure, loving relationships.
So it's not about never fighting.
Right.
It's about fighting fair and learning to connect in a healthier way.
You got it. And that's what we will explore further in the next part of this deep dive.
All right, stay tuned. All right, so we established that these negative cycles, this pursuer-withdraw dance, can really wreak havoc in a relationship. But you mentioned that EFT can help couples break free from these patterns. What makes this approach so effective?
Well, one of the core principles of EFT is that our emotions aren't the enemy. In fact, they are powerful messengers, trying to tell us something important about our needs and desires.
So instead of trying to bottle up those emotions, we should be listening to them, trying to understand what they're trying to communicate.
Exactly. For instance, let's go back to our example of Sarah and John. Remember how Sarah became increasingly critical when John retreated into his work?
Yeah.
EFT might help her explore the emotions beneath that criticism. What is she truly feeling? Perhaps it's fear of being abandoned or a deep longing for connection that's not being met.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not really about the dishes in the sink or who forgot to take out the trash. It's about those deeper unmet needs that are driving the conflict.
Precisely. And on the flip side, EFT can help John, the withdrawer in this case, understand that his retreat, while intended to protect the relationship, is actually creating more distance and disconnection.
So it's about helping both partners understand their own emotional landscape and how their reactions are impacting the other person.
Right. And once that awareness is there, couples can start to develop new ways of communicating and responding to each other's needs.
But that sounds like it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability. It's not always easy to dig into those deeper emotional layers, especially when you have been hurt or disappointed in the past.
Absolutely. It can be challenging, but the rewards are well worth the effort in my own practice. I have seen EFT help couples who are on the brink of separation transform their relationships into something truly beautiful and secure.
That's amazing. So what does this process look like in practice? If a couple decides to try EFT, what can they expect?
Well, typically they will work with a trained EFT therapist who will guide them through a series of stages. The first stage is all about identifying those negative cycles, those automatic reactions that keep them stuck in the same frustrating dance.
So it's about recognizing those patterns that we talked about earlier, the pursuer-withdrawer dynamic and the 3 variations of the negative cycle.
Yes, exactly. Once those patterns are clear, the therapist will help each partner explore the deeper emotions that are driving their behavior. For Sarah, it might be that fear of abandonment we discussed for John. It might be a fear of conflict or a feeling of inadequacy.
So it's about getting to the root of the problem, not just treating the symptoms.
Exactly. And once those underlying emotions are brought to the surface, the couple can begin to reframe their conflict. Instead of seeing each other as the enemy, they start to see each other as allies, both longing for the same connection, just expressing it in different ways.
That shift in perspective seems crucial. It's like they're finally speaking the same language, finally understanding where the other person is coming from.
You got it. And that's when the real magic starts to happen.
Okay.
The therapist will then guide the couple in developing new, healthier ways to communicate their needs and emotions. They will learn to express their vulnerability, to offer and receive comfort, and to create a space where both partners feel safe and secure.
Okay, so it's about learning a new dance one that's more harmonious and less likely to end with both partners feeling stepped on and bruised.
I love that analogy.
Yeah,
It's about moving from that chaotic, out-of-sync dance of disconnection to a more fluid, graceful dance of connection.
that's a beautiful way to put it, and I think it offers so much hope for couples who might be feeling discouraged or stuck in their own negative cycles.
Absolutely. EFT provides a roadmap for creating a more loving and fulfilling relationship. It's about understanding that conflict doesn't have to be destructive. It can actually be an opportunity for growth, for deeper intimacy, and for creating a bond that's stronger than ever before.
So in essence, those fights that might feel like the end of the world could actually be the catalyst for a stronger, healthier relationship.
Precisely. And that's the power of understanding these dynamics and having the tools to shift those negative cycles. It's about remembering that we are all wired for connection, and with a little bit of effort, we can learn to dance together in a way that brings us closer instead of tearing us apart.
All right, so we have talked about the pursuer-withdrawer dance. We have explored the potential of EFT, and we've even touched on some of the deeper emotions that might be fueling those conflicts. Where do we go from here? What is the next step for our listeners who are eager to put this knowledge into action?
Well, the first step is awareness. I would encourage our listeners to pay attention to their own patterns in their relationships. Are you typically the pursuer or the withdrawer? What are your go-to reactions when you are feeling disconnected from your partner?
Okay, so it's about becoming more mindful of our own behavior and the patterns we tend to fall into.
Exactly. And once you are aware of those patterns, you can start to make conscious choices about how you respond.
So instead of reacting automatically, we can take a pause, check in with ourselves, and choose a different approach.
You got it. And that pause, that moment of reflection can make all the difference. It allows you to step out of that negative cycle and make a choice that will move you towards connection rather than further away from it.
That's a really empowering message. It's like we have the power to rewrite the script of our relationships to create a new dance that's more fulfilling for both partners.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't about blaming yourself or your partner. It's about understanding that we all have these patterns, these automatic ways of responding. And with awareness and effort, we can learn to shift them.
So what are some practical steps our listeners can take to start making these changes?
Well, in addition to paying attention to their own patterns, they can try incorporating some of the communication techniques that are central to EFT, for example. Instead of criticizing or blaming them, they can focus on expressing their needs and feelings in a vulnerable and authentic way.
So instead of saying, you never listen to me,
Yeah,
they might say, I'm feeling a little disconnected right now. Can we talk?
exactly.
Yeah.
It's about shifting from blame and accusation to vulnerability and a desire for connection.
That makes sense. It's about creating a safe space where both partners can express themselves without fear of judgment or rejection.
Precisely. And remember, this takes practice. It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to show up, be honest with ourselves and our partners, and be open to trying new things.
So even if we have been stuck in that same negative cycle for years, there is still hope for us to break free and create something better.
Absolutely. It's never too late to learn a new dance. The desire for connection is a powerful force, and with the right tools and support, we can all learn to dance together in a way that brings us closer, not further apart.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm sure our listeners are already starting to think about how they can apply these concepts to their own relationships. Before we wrap up, what are some resources our listeners can explore if they want to delve deeper into EFT or learn more about these communication techniques?
Well, the Soul Care article itself has some great links to resources on EFT. They also have a list of certified EFT therapists in different areas. Additionally, there are some excellent books and websites dedicated to helping couples improve their communication and build stronger relationships.
Fantastic. We will make sure to include those links in the show notes for our listeners now. Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to pause for a moment and give our listeners a chance to reflect. We have covered a lot of ground today, from those frustrating negative cycles to the transformative power of EFT. What is resonating with you the most? What are some key takeaways you are going to walk away with today?
That's a great question. I would also invite listeners to consider this. If our fights are often about connection, what would happen if we got better at expressing our needs directly? What if, instead of resorting to those automatic reactions, we paused, took a deep breath, and reached out to our partner with vulnerability and authenticity?
That's a powerful thought to ponder. And it's a great segue into the final part of our deep dive, where we will explore some practical tips and strategies for improving communication, breaking free from those negative cycles, and creating a more connected and fulfilling relationship. All right, we are back for the final part of our deep dive into why we fight and how to fight better. So far, we have explored how those heated arguments might actually be a clumsy attempt to connect, and how recognizing the pursuer-withdrawer dance can be a game changer.
And we have talked about how emotionally focused therapy, or EFT, can help couples break free from those negative cycles and create a more secure and loving bond.
Right. Now let's get down to brass tacks. What are some concrete steps our listeners can take to improve their communication and create that deeper connection they are craving?
Well, one of the most important things is learning to identify your triggers. What are those specific words or behaviors from your partner that tend to set you off? Once you know your triggers, you can start to manage your reactions more effectively.
Okay, so it is about becoming aware of those buttons that get pushed and figuring out a way to disarm them before they explode.
Exactly. Instead of reacting impulsively, take a pause, breathe deeply, and ask yourself, what is going on here? What am I really feeling and needing in this moment?
So instead of lashing out or withdrawing, we take a time out to check in with ourselves.
Yes, that moment of self-reflection is crucial. It allows you to choose a more constructive response.
So what does a constructive response look like? What are some practical communication tips that can help couples navigate those tricky moments?
One powerful technique is using I statements instead of blaming your partner with you statements like, you never listen to me. Try expressing your own feelings and needs with I statements like, I am feeling hurt and unheard right now. Could we please talk about this?
That's a subtle shift, but I can see how it would make a huge difference in how the message is received.
Absolutely. I statements help you take ownership of your emotions and invite your partner into a dialogue rather than a defensive standoff.
Okay, what are some other communication gems that can help couples move towards connection?
Another key skill is active listening. This means truly paying attention to what your partner is saying, both verbally and non-verbally, without interrupting or formulating your rebuttal in your head.
It is about putting down our own agenda for a moment
Yeah.
and genuinely trying to understand the other person's perspective.
Yes, and reflecting back what you hear to ensure you are understanding correctly. You might say, it sounds like you are feeling overwhelmed and need some space. Did I get that right?
So it is not just about hearing the words, it is about reflecting back the emotions behind them too.
Exactly. That kind of validation can go a long way in creating a sense of safety and understanding.
These are all great tips. It sounds like EFT is about creating a culture of empathy and compassion within the relationship.
You are right on the mark. It is about fostering a space where both partners feel safe to be vulnerable, express their needs, and know that they will be met with understanding and care.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We have learned that fighting doesn't have to mean the end of a relationship, that those conflicts can actually be opportunities for growth and deeper connection.
And we've explored some practical tools and techniques that can help couples shift those negative cycles and create a more loving and fulfilling relationship.
So as we wrap up, what is the one piece of advice you would leave our listeners with today?
Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Many couples struggle with these same patterns. Be kind to yourselves, be patient with each other, and don't be afraid to seek help if you need it. EFT can provide a roadmap for creating a more connected and joyful relationship.
That's a beautiful message to end on. And remember, the desire for connection is a powerful force. With a little effort and understanding, we can all learn to dance together in a way that brings us closer, not further apart. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.